Imagine a nation that is just sitting on literal mountains of gold, like
Wow.
a place pumping out billions of dollars in liquefied natural gas.
Oh, yeah. The natural wealth is staggering.
Right. And they boast these vast, untouched forests and hold almost endless agricultural potential. On a financial balance sheet, it looks like an absolute powerhouse.
It really does.
But then, in this exact same nation, nearly 80% of the people are practically invisible to the government. Like they don't officially exist. Welcome to the paradox of Papua New Guinea.
It is a stunning disconnect, honestly. And to really understand what's happening, we are looking at a deeply compelling stack of sources today for this deep dive.
Yeah, we've got some great material for you.
We really do. We are pulling from the nation's ambitious Vision 2050 blueprint, the highly detailed Reset at 50 20-year roadmap recently presented by Prime Minister James Marape, and some complex mathematical optimization models tracking the country's Human Development Index.
And our mission for you today is to unpack exactly what is lacking in PNG right now. We want to understand the systemic bottlenecks, explore the government's structural big bets to fix them, and most importantly, figure out what the ordinary citizen can actually do about it.
Because as we'll see, you can draft the most brilliant policy in the world.
Right, but it means absolutely nothing without the people.
Exactly. Nothing at all.
Okay, let's unpack this. Looking through this stack of reports, the thing I just couldn't get past was this massive gap between the GDP and the actual lived reality of the people.
It's jarring.
You look at the macroeconomic numbers and they look rich, but then you read the Reset at 50 roadmap and the government is, well, they're openly declaring a human development crisis.
Yeah, and to put that crisis into perspective, we have to look at the math. The optimization models measure the country using the Human Development Index, or HDI.
Which is a composite statistic, right?
Right. It tracks life expectancy, education, and per capita income. And right now, PNG's HDI sits incredibly low, at around 0.555.
Wow. And that ranks them somewhere around 155th to 160th globally out of 193 countries.
Yep, down near the bottom.
And their stated goal in Vision 2050 is to reach the top 50, which would require an HDI over 0.7.
And to give you a sense of what a 0.7 actually feels like in reality, it's roughly the equivalent of moving from the living standards of rural sub-Saharan Africa to the living standards of a rapidly developing country like Vietnam or Egypt.
That is a massive leap.
Huge leap. But the mathematical models indicate that their current progress is moving at a snail's pace. And when you look at the raw statistics behind that 0.555 number, I mean, the human toll is severe.
Oh, the health statistics alone stop me in my tracks.
You're rough.
The maternal mortality rate is just devastating.
Yeah.
A woman living in rural PNG has a 1 in 25 chance of dying in childbirth over her lifetime.
It's a tragedy. And the crisis extends heavily to the next generation, too. The data shows that child stunting has actually worsened over a recent 10-year period. It rose from 48% to 51%.
That's more than half of all kids.
More than half. And stunting isn't just about physical height, It permanently impacts cognitive development and future earning potential.
Right.
Furthermore, because overall immunization coverage has declined, the country is battling the return of diseases that were previously considered eradicated.
Like what?
Like polio and leprosy.
Wait. I'm trying to wrap my head around that. How can child stunting and basic immunization access actually get worse over a decade when the country is simultaneously experiencing massive commodity booms? Like, where is all that natural gas and gold money physically going?
What's fascinating here is how the sources classify this exact economic phenomenon. They use terms like jobless growth and ruthless growth.
Ruthless growth, that is a heavy, heavy phrase.
It is, but mechanically it describes exactly what is happening. A commodity boom driven by wealth extraction, like mining, logging, or drilling for liquid natural gas. That is highly capital intensive, not labor intensive.
Okay, meaning what exactly?
Meaning it requires massive billion-dollar machinery and highly specialized foreign engineers. It does not require millions of local laborers. So the billions generated by these projects go straight to foreign corporations and a very small local elite. It never enters the local wage economy.
So it's basically completely walled off from the average person.
Completely.
It makes me think of PNG's economy like an immense water pipe that has been driven deep into a desert oasis. It's pumping out millions of gallons of wealth, but the pipe is completely sealed. It runs right over the heads of the thirsty locals and empties straight into foreign cargo ships.
That is precisely the mechanism of jobless growth. Great analogy. The wealth is exported, completely bypassing the local population. And this becomes a massive problem because PNG has what's called a youth bulge.
Right, a demographic reality where a huge portion of the population is young and rapidly entering adulthood.
Exactly. And because there are no formal jobs being created by this economic growth, these young people are forced into the informal sector.
And for anyone unfamiliar with that term, the informal sector basically means people surviving outside the taxed official economy.
Right.
It's selling goods in local street markets, subsistence farming, working cash in hand without any labor protections or safety nets. You combine that with the education bottlenecks, where over a third of the population cannot read or write, and huge dropout rates occur before grade 12.
It's a perfect storm.
Yeah, you have an entire generation locked out of their own country's wealth. It's like building a luxury skyscraper on a crumbling foundation.
Exactly. A booming GDP means nothing if your workforce is facing chronic malnutrition.
But if the pipe is pumping out all this wealth,
Yeah.
and the government is presumably taxing these foreign corporations at least somewhat, why isn't the state capturing that revenue and using it to build a functioning society?
Well, the national reviews point to a massive accountability deficit. The sources detail how funds intended for development are often completely mismanaged. One of the primary mechanisms for this is the use of trust accounts.
Okay, how do those actually work? Because just the name sounds incredibly shady in this context.
It's a huge issue. Essentially, instead of a government department spending an allocated budget through the transparent, auditable public treasury system, the money gets parked in a special trust account, supposedly for a future project.
Supposedly.
Right. Because these accounts often sit outside standard public oversight. The money just stagnates there, it gets chipped away by opaque administrative fees, or it is simply diverted. The roadmap actually acknowledges that major projects are routinely launched without rigorous, data-driven evidence.
He just thrown together.
Yeah.
But even if we assume the best intentions, even if a well-meaning politician genuinely wanted to build a hospital or a school, they're running into a completely different foundational roadblock. The invisibility factor.
Oh, this part is wild.
This blew my mind. The roadmap points out that millions of citizens are literally invisible to the state. Out of the entire population, only 3.7 million are registered.
Yep.
Fewer than 22% are enrolled in the National Identification or NID system.
If you are trying to govern a developing nation, think about the sheer logistics of that gap.
Right. If you're listening to this from a place where you routinely complain about the DMV being slow or having to renew your driver's license, imagine a scenario where nearly 80% of your country doesn't even have an ID card. They don't have a birth certificate.
You cannot run a functional state blind. I mean, how do you plan a national vaccine rollout if you don't know how many people live in a specific province?
You can't.
How do you know how many textbooks to print for grade 1? How do you distribute social protection funds or run a fully fair election?
Right, you're just left guessing.
Exactly, you were left guessing. And usually central governments guess wrong when trying to manage remote areas.
And when a government is that fundamentally disconnected from its people, it obviously does something to the national psyche.
And the Vision 2050 document dives deep into a psychological barrier that has developed among the citizens.
Yes, the mindset challenge. Yeah. It describes a pervasive dependency mentality and a scarcity mentality. The authors argue that citizens have become passive recipients, just waiting for goods and services from the government or foreign aid, rather than acting as agents of change.
It's a harsh assessment.
It is. And I've got to push back on this. Is it really fair to blame the citizens for having a dependency mentality or a lack of entrepreneurial drive when the systemic governance is failing them so profoundly?
It's a fair question.
I mean, if the roads are deteriorating so you literally cannot get your cash crops to market, if the institutions lack accountability, and if the billions of dollars of your own country's wealth are bypassing you in that sealed pipe, how are you supposed to just bootstrap an abundance mentality?
That is a very legitimate pushback, and it's a tension that the roadmap documents actually openly grapple with. They really do.
They admit it's a two-way street.
Oh, absolutely. The reports don't let the government off the hook at all. They explicitly acknowledge that poor governance, corruption, and a total lack of basic infrastructure actively breed this exact kind of cynicism. Learned helplessness is a very real, logical response to a broken system.
Right, because why try if the game is rigged from the start?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the reason the Vision 2050 and Reset at 50 documents focus so heavily on the mindset of the citizens is because they realize that systemic reform cannot take root in a vacuum.
Okay, explain that a bit more.
Well, the argument they make is this. Even if the government magically fixed every road and eliminated all corruption tomorrow, the nation wouldn't instantly transform unless the citizens simultaneously shifted their mindset. If the population remains passive, the newly built systems will simply decay again. You need both forces acting at once. Structural reform from the top and a psychological entrepreneurial shift from the bottom.
Okay, that makes sense, which perfectly bridges into the top-down portion of this plan. The government's proposed structural solutions, they call these the big bets.
The big bets.
Recognizing these dual failures, both the systemic corruption and the social disconnect, the Reset at 50 roadmap lays out some highly specific interventions. And here's where it gets really interesting to me. Reading through these, the contrast in their strategies is absolutely wild.
Oh, it completely illustrates the unique extremes of trying to develop a nation in the 21st century.
Yeah. On one hand, you have leapfrogging infrastructure. PNG has some of the most rugged, mountainous, heavily forested terrain on Earth. Laying traditional fiber optic cables across that landscape would take decades and billions of dollars.
Not to mention the maintenance.
Right. So the plan proposes jumping straight to space. They want to liberalize the telecommunications market and use low Earth orbit and medium Earth orbit satellites, LEO and MEO technology, to instantly bring high-speed internet to remote rural areas.
It's a strategy to bypass the geographic constraints entirely. By beaming connectivity down rather than digging trenches across mountain ranges, you can get rural schools and remote health clinics online immediately. That fundamentally changes education access and disease monitoring.
So you have this space-age, high-tech solution. But then, literally in the same section of the big bets, you have interventions that are incredibly grounded and urgent. They are allocating a specific budget, PGK $2 million a year, just to fix and maintain public toilets in urban areas to mitigate the spread of tuberculosis.
It's a stark realization of the country's dual reality.
It is the ultimate paradox of modern development. You can import the 21st century from space with a satellite. But if you don't have the 19th century infrastructure of a working toilet, your workforce is still going to succumb to tuberculosis. You have to solve 1890 and 2050 at the exact same time.
That is a brilliant way to frame it, and it shows a crucial shift in the government's approach. They are moving from ad hoc, politically motivated planning to data-driven, evidence-based policy.
Focusing on what actually works.
Yes. Fixing urban public toilets is identified as a hyper-local, quick win that directly addresses a massive bottleneck in human capital. They are also targeting specific institutional fixes, like overhauling PNG power to stop the rolling blackouts that cripple businesses.
And funding the Auditor General, right?
Yes, fully funding the Auditor General to actually trace those trust accounts we talked about and aggressively fight corruption.
But if the central government is struggling to even keep the lights on with PNG power, they obviously can't build and staff a complex medical clinic in a remote mountain village.
No, not a chance.
And that power vacuum is exactly why the roadmap leans heavily into the only infrastructure that is already functioning on the ground.
The partnerships with churches and civil society organizations.
The sources point out that right now, churches and faith-based organizations provide over 40% of the basic health and education services in the entire country. 40%.
It's staggering. And they often do it in the most isolated, difficult-to-reach areas where the central state has absolutely no presence.
So the big bet here is to stop treating these religious and civil groups as an unofficial fallback plan and start treating them as formal funded partners.
Exactly.
The state plans to essentially contract these organizations to deliver services on behalf of the government.
This represents a major structural pivot. It's an admission of the state's limitations. Rather than trying to build a massive bureaucracy from scratch, it is a highly pragmatic approach to utilizing the infrastructure that actually exists, operates efficiently, and crucially, that the local people already trust.
But all of these government roadmaps, the satellite networks, the anti-corruption funding, the church partnerships, none of it means anything if the people aren't engaged. Which brings us to the most crucial element of this entire deep dive, the role of the ordinary PNG citizen.
This is where we get into the concept of a national covenant. Prime Minister Marape and the Vision 2050 authors repeatedly stress that this 20-year roadmap isn't just a government manifesto.
Right, it's bigger than that.
It requires the citizens to transition from being passive observers to active co-creators of their society.
And one of our sources breaks this down using principles from Catholic social teaching, specifically the concepts of solidarity and subsidiarity. And I found this fascinating because it mechanically aligns perfectly with the secular policy goals of the PNG government.
Yes. Those two principles deal directly with the mechanics of human agency and community power.
Solidarity is essentially the recognition that we are all responsible for each other, like a firm commitment to the common good rather than just individual survival. But subsidiarity is the one that really clicked for me.
How so?
Well, subsidiarity is the idea that higher levels of government should not take away what individuals, families, and local communities can accomplish by their own enterprise.
Mechanically, it's the principle of decentralization applied to everyday life. You don't want a massive central bureaucracy in the capital city trying to manage a village school. A bureaucrat sitting 500 miles away doesn't know if the local teacher showed up for work today,
No, of course not.
but a local parent-teacher board does. Subsidiarity argues that problems should be solved at the most local level possible, empowering the people closest to the issue.
So let's connect this abstract concept directly to you, the listener. If you are an ordinary citizen looking at a massive national crisis, it's easy to feel powerless. But under the principle of subsidiarity, true power isn't actually sitting in a government office in the capital. True national power is in the informal sector, it's in the local church group, and it's in the family unit.
The documents outline exactly what this looks like in practice. It starts at the absolute ground level, the family. The roadmap calls for parents to take serious responsibility for nurturing youth, instilling good ethics, and keeping them in school.
Because if that human capital isn't developed at home, no government policy can retroactively manufacture it later.
Right. And it scales up to the community level. Instead of waiting for foreign businesses to come in with heavy machinery and extract resources, the Vision 2050 plan encourages communities to form cooperative societies to engage in wealth creation.
Like in agriculture, which is still the largest employer in the country.
Exactly. If local farmers pool their resources to buy a truck or processing equipment, they retain the profit within their own village rather than watching it get siphoned off.
This raises an important question, though. How does this kind of citizen empowerment, forming a local farming co-op or a parent-teacher board, actually fix the systemic government failures we talked about earlier? How does it solve the accountability deficit and those corrupt trust accounts? Because growing your own coffee beans doesn't automatically stop a politician in the capital from stealing public funds.
It doesn't stop it automatically, but an engaged population with a positive, purpose-driven mindset is the ultimate long-term safeguard against corruption.
How so?
Think about the mechanics of it. When citizens view themselves as co-creators of their society, when they have economic skin in the game through their own enterprises, when they pay taxes from their formal businesses, and they understand their inherent dignity, they stop accepting poor governance as a given.
Oh, I see. They stop waiting for handouts and start demanding audits.
Exactly. They hold local leaders to standards of integrity because they no longer see themselves as subjects hoping for a favor. They see themselves as the rightful owners of the nation's future. The entire dynamic of a democracy changes when the informal sector formalizes its mindset. The people realize they hold the ultimate authority.
It's a complete paradigm shift, moving from scarcity and dependence to abundance and agency.
And that psychological shift is the absolute crux of the PNG reset.
So to summarize the incredible journey of this deep dive, Papua New Guinea is standing at a deeply critical juncture. You have a nation possessing almost unparalleled natural wealth, yet facing a severe human development emergency, where mothers and children are at risk, the education system is bottlenecked, and the wealth is just bypassing the people.
But the government has mapped out the structural solutions. They are attempting to leapfrog geographic barriers by deploying LEO satellites for internet, while simultaneously addressing basic sanitation to fight disease.
Fixing the toilets and launching the satellites?
Exactly. They are pushing to fund anti-corruption bodies and pragmatically partnering with churches to deliver basic healthcare where the state cannot reach.
But the true engine of this transformation isn't going to be a policy document, a new trust account, or a mineral deposit. It is the everyday citizen. It's the family and the local community adopting that abundance mentality and taking active, localized ownership of their future.
Policy provides the framework, but the people provide the momentum.
Which just brings me to a final thought for you to ponder. We so often measure a country's wealth by looking at what is buried under its soil, the gold, the gas, the timber. We look at the macroeconomic balance sheet and we think we see success. But what if the only infrastructure that can truly save a nation isn't a paved road or a high-tech satellite in orbit? What if the ultimate infrastructure is a shared belief in a people's own agency? If you were to start building that infrastructure today, right in your own neighborhood, what is the very first thing you would do?
That is the question every citizen, no matter where they live, has to answer.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the paradox and the promise of Papua New Guinea. We'll catch you next time.